Welcome to my presentation, Where's My Ransom? Hunting for Ransomware Gangs using Radare2 and Yara. Ransomware got a lot of news coverage in the past few months and years. Time by time I saw some reports popping up in all the different feeds I consume. In the past, ransomware was more a private computer problem. The user downloads a malicious file and gets infected. The infection vectors were different. Examples I noticed within my surroundings area were infections through torrent files, emails, and apparent cracked programs. Nowadays we have ransomware targeting industrial control systems. An example is the ECANS or snake ransomware, which got a lot of news coverage in 2019 and early 2020. In addition, ransomware groups make use of the European General Data Protection Regulation, or short GDPR. They steal data from victims, encrypt it on their system, and threatens them to publish everything. This would lead to a GDPR issue because most of the time personal data is affected in such leaks. One example is the Club Group. They publicly list and shame their victims and even provide some parts of the stolen data to download. Next is ransomware-as-a-service. Here malware authors offer their samples in a dedicated business model. They sell source code of the ransomware or offer to deploy the malware of their customers on already infected systems. The security company FireEye reported that the Maze Group even have a nice looking GUI to track all infections, see who already paid the ransom, and even allowed to hire pen testers to perform different steps of the cyber kill chain. Other ransomware groups switched their focus from smaller targets to businesses and organizations. This is called big game hunting. Even the FBI stated this as a problem in a public service announcement. All these different trends and new facets of modern ransomware caught my attention. But first I ask what has changed. For me, ransomware was always not that advanced. It just encrypts different files on a computer, blocks different ways for recovery, such as deleting shadow copy, and displays a ransom note. So I performed some internet research about different ransomware in the past decades. I want to state that the list is just an overview and not complete. To my surprise, the first known ransomware reached back to 1989. The AIDS Trojan was written by a biologist, Dr. Joseph Popp. The Trojan horse replaces the autoexec.bat file. As soon as the boot count reaches 90, the ransomware hides all directories and encrypts the names of all files in the C drive. Afterwards, a ransom of $189 is placed. Next was Archivus and GPcoder in 2005. GPcoder decrypts different files on the victim's computer using RSA encryption. However, the use keys were kinda short. As a result, decryptors can easily crack them. Archivus first used more advanced RSA encryption with bigger keys. Due to this, decryptors have a harder job to brute force the decryption key. In 2009, Wundo was present. This ransomware is either a Trojan horse or a computer bomb. It causes pop-ups and advertising rogue anti-spyware programs on the victim's computer. In some cases, it even leads to performance degradation and denial of service of some websites. In 2011, Winlog was active. It displays pornographic images and demands a $10 ransom. It must be paid via premium rate SMS. After paying, the victim receives the unlock code. The people behind the ransom were arrested 1 year earlier in 2010. They reportedly earned over $16 million from SMS scam. 1 year later, the police ransomware was present. It also known as Radare2. This Trojan displays a fake notice from a law enforcement agency claiming that the computer has been used for illegal activities. As a result, the victim must pay a fine. CryptoLocker was active in 2013. It generates a 2048-bit RSA key pair for encryption. The ransomware threatens the victim that the private key will be deleted if the ransom is not paid. After a deadline, the price of the private key increased to 10 Bitcoin. In 2014, CryptoWall was in the news. It was distributed as a part of malvertising campaign on the Sido ad network. In this case, the ads redirects to rogue websites that use browser plugin exploits which would then download the payload. This JavaScript payload is signed and looks like a trustworthy security software. 1 year later, Loki, TeslaScript, and KeyRanger were present. Loki was distributed using emails with Word documents containing malicious macros. Interesting is that the master key for the TeslaScript ransomware was published by the developers themselves. And KeyRanger was one of the first ransomware targeting macOS. Based on Palo Alto networks, it affected more than 7,000 Mac users. In 2017, big ransomware families made the news: WannaCry and Petya. WannaCry exploits a SMB-v1 remote code execution vulnerability. The exploit is known as Eternal Blue and was leaked from the US NSA. It affected more than 230,000 computers in over 150 countries. Marcus Hutchins, known as MalwareTech, analyzed the ransomware and hosted the sinkhole, which is embedded within the malware. This stopped a lot of the infections. Petya aimed to infect the master boot record, so the next time the system boots, it blocks Windows from starting and shows the ransom node. GenCrab and SamSam were present in 2018. Interestingly, the GenCrab authors stated in January 2018 that they earned enough money and will enjoy their well-deserved retirement. They claimed that they made over $2 billion. SamSam targets JBoss servers. It uses a RDP brute force attack to guess weak passwords on the servers. Last year, Ryuk, Robinhood, Clop, and Maze made the news. Ryuk uses a combination of AES and RSA encryptions or algorithms to encrypt the files. This makes it very hard to recover them. The Robinhood ransomware does not steal money from the rich and gives it to the poor. It rather targeted the cities of Baltimore, Maryland, Greenville, and North Carolina. As mentioned in my introduction, Clop threatens to publish all stolen data from the victims, and Maze offers a ransomware-as-a-service business model. This year, 3 ransomware families were of interest for me: Ecans, which I already mentioned in my introduction, Sudinokibi, and DoppelPaymer. I would say that Sudinokibi is kinda common when it comes to its used methods. However, they targeted big organizations and businesses. DoppelPaymer is a variant of BitPaymer ransomware. It attacked the city of Edcoach, Texas, and the Chilean Ministry of Agriculture. After I clearly saw that there is a big trend to big game hunting and the threat actors get more sophisticated, I set different goals to my research. First, I want to learn about ransomware and their evolvements within different families. Within those, I'm interested in finding new samples besides those already known to the public. Malware authors are software developers, and similar to any other coder, they really reuse source code too. You just don't have the time to develop every project from ground on. And if different functionality is already working for you, why not just reuse it? Similar to this, I was interested in code sharing between those families. Some blog posts point out that modern malware share code between different families. So if I write a Yara rule for a specific mechanism, such as the encryption algorithm, I would be able to detect other families if they share the encryption process. The last goal I defined is the detection of security incident or leaks based on VirusTotal uploads. Within security incidents, collected files must be analyzed to determine if they are malicious or not. To perform this classification, Aristotle can be used. So if a ransomware infection occurs, the company could upload all collected files to Aristotle. By using Aristotle's hunting features, I would be able to detect all the uploaded files. In order to achieve the goals, I need different technologies and tools to help me. I used Yara as a classification and identification tool of different malware samples. To not analyze each sample by hand, Yara allows me to quickly classify them based on a rule set. I will elaborate on Yara in the following slide. To use my Yara use, I used VirusTotal and hybrid analysis. Both allow to hunt for samples based on the uploaded rule. VirusTotal offers rich hunting capabilities. It includes retro hunts where all available samples within VirusTotal are checked, and live hunts where your rule rules are thrown against all newly uploaded files. If a rule triggers, you get a notification. However, Virus2Total is very expensive. Due to this, I also used hybrid analysis. You need to register an account for free to use the so-called advanced search. Similar to Virus2Total's retro hunt, all already uploaded files are checked using your Yara rule. In my opinion, hybrid analysis provides less hits compared to Virus2Total. To create the rule and find interesting features within the ransomware samples, I used Radare2 and Yara. Both allow me to analyze the malware in different detail degrees. On the one hand, to give me an overview of the capabilities, and on the other hand, to perform deep analysis of different functionalities in assembly. But first I want to give a brief introduction into Yara. As told in the documentation, Yara is designed to help researchers classify and identify malware samples. However, it is not limited to those intentions. On the right hand side you see a sample rule I wrote. In line 1 you find the keyword rule, the name of the rule and optional tags. It is important to give your rule a good and descriptive name. I personally use Kaspersky's naming convention, where each name consists of 5 parts. First, a description of the threat group. Second, the name, language or designator. Third, the threat actor name. Fourth, a description of the malware name or specific family. And fifth, the rule's intention. As a result, a sample name would be ransom _ZZ _TA505 _clop _encryption. ZZ just the place that no country, language or designator is known. Next is the meta section. It describes the rule and gives more context. Here I have 5 mandatory and 3 optional parts. The description, name of the author, creation date, reference and hash, if available, are mandatory. The TLP classification, the last modification date and the version are optional. The third part of each rule is the strings section. Here you define the characteristics for the specific family or sample you wrote the rule for. I try to have 3 different groups of strings. First, unique artifacts such as mutex names, user agent strings, registry keys and more. Second, a group of specific non-unique strings such as properties and structures and sections and entropies and file sizes. And third, byte sequences. It allows me to have a good overview and structure of the rule. Furthermore, it is easier to define a good condition. This brings us to the last part, the condition section. Here, the trigger is defined in a Boolean statement. So which strings must be present to trigger the rule? In my exemplary rule, the strings R2CON, is and pretty must be present in the rule, or on the sample I'm testing it against. The byte sequence must be present too. The last section, here it is defined as X, should be not present in the scanned sample. So what did I do during my research? I first collected initial samples from blog posts and available incident reports. I downloaded the samples using hybrid analysis of Virus2Total and analyzed them in a quick manner. Based on my findings, I create the first rule to detect the sample or even samples if I was able to initially collect more than one malware. Next, I test my rule. For this, I have different test sets of about 5 million unique malware samples and 800,000 unique goodware samples. The rule should not trigger on the goodware set, but can trigger on the malware set. If I have hits, I check if they belong to the same family or if code was shared between the samples. If I get a lot of false positive, I have to improve the rule and test it again. The fourth step is the hunting part. As mentioned, I use Virus2Total and hybrid analysis to collect more samples. By using those, I am able to improve the Yara rule and create even better rules. If I feel I need more samples and the rule could be improved even more, I jump to step 3 again and continue from there. So let's jump into the demo part. I will show my process for creating 2 different rules, one for the Maze ransomware and one for the Clop ransomware. Let's start with Maze. I downloaded 3 different Maze samples from publicly available reports about the ransomware. I use Cutter where I leave all analysis settings on default. To start with, I look through the string section and focus on unique strings and different artifacts I can find. At the beginning, I see some runtime generated strings. Right afterwards, there are Windows API and function related ones. This is very common for each PE file you will analyze. At an offset of 100.151.E8, a lot of keyboard and language related strings occur, which we can skip for now. Next we have some interesting looking strings, including Windows paths and even a PDB file string. This is always extremely useful for a Yara rule. Again, we can skip over the API related functions and the big strings containing nothing really interesting. And next, some really unique looking strings occur again. All those certificate related domains are common in PE files and therefore not really interesting for our Yara rule. We do the same procedure for the second file. It is also interesting to note that the symbols give some hints about potential Windows API calls the malware is performing. Due to this, different strings could be present. Identical to the sample number 1, we find a lot of runtime generated strings. Here we find a string that looks kinda odd. However, I'm not sure if it's runtime generated or not. I note it because its length is larger compared to the other ones. Right afterwards, there are some interesting looking NAN and SAN strings. I note them because they stand out to me. Again, we find some runtime generated strings and keyboard, as well as language related ones, and even 2 more PDB files. So that's it for this sample. Finally, let's look at the third collected sample. The symbols show some network-related API functions. Maybe we find some domains or IP addresses in this sample. We already know the runtime generated strings, however, some stand out to me. They look similar and are a bit longer compared to the other ones. I note them. Those strings look like UUIDs, although the structure is not how an UUID should be. It could be an ID related to this malware. Together with the hash looking string, I note them too. Again, we skip over Windows API, keyboard and location related, as well as the runtime generated strings. At the end of the file, we find a version and something Windows 7 Service Pack 1 related, which is always also interesting for our Yara rule. Before I write the rule, I check the different strings I found in a Google search. This allows me to spot obvious candidates or false positives, and I can also check if some are already related to the Maze ransomware or other malware. In my Google search, I did not find anything odd. As a result, I will use all noted strings. Let's write the rule. For this, I use an editor, here Visual Studio Code, with the Yara syntax package. I name the rule ransom_zz_ta to 101_maze_gen and fill out the meter section. I will not provide a reference because they are from different sources. Within the string section, I don't have any bytes. As a result, I create 2 different groups, S for unique strings and A for unique artifacts. Now I will fast forward over me filling out the string sections. I look for full words and the ASCII representation only. This usually gives me a lot less false positives for such strings. Finally, we focus on the condition section. I make sure to look for the MZ header, and the rule should not trigger on very large files. Therefore, the file size must be below 800 kilobytes. Unique strings can lead to a lot of false positives. Due to this, I limit them to trigger only if more than half of them occur. The artifacts are usually very specific and should not be present in other malware samples. Therefore, I want the rule to trigger if only one hits. I also make sure that the rule triggers if 18 of all the strings are present within one sample. After finishing writing the rule, the next step is to test the rule. For this, I use a tests set with approximately 800,000 goodware and 5 million malware samples. The rule should not trigger on any goodware sample, but can trigger on malware samples. If it hits, I must check if the sample is related to the Maze ransomware. The test itself can take a lot of time. Due to this, I fast forward the recording and show you the results. There were no hits on the goodware set, but I found some Maze samples in the malware test set. The rule is working as intended. The next step is to hunt for more samples. In the case of the Maze ransomware Yara rule, I use hybrid analysis advanced Yara hunting feature. I log in and copy and paste the rule into the corresponding box. As you can see, 3 samples were found. Some of them are already known to us, because they have the same hash as the ones we downloaded. But the first one, starting with 543F and ending with F47B, is new. By using this sample, we can enhance our Yara rule and find even more samples. Now we will create a rule for the Clop ransomware. Identical to the Maze ransomware, I was able to collect one sample from public resources. I will use cutoff analysis and Visual Studio Code as a notepad. First, I look through the string section and look for unique strings. As we already know, runtime generated keyboard and language as well as Windows API call strings are not interesting for our Yara rule. We skip them. Here we have the first interesting strings. Some look like file names such as autoexec.bat. Next we find a public key. This could be used for encryption. Right afterwards we find more interesting strings, including some mentioning Clop. Again we skip over all Windows API function strings and we find more referencing Clop. That's it for the string section. Let's take a look at the symbols. One stands out. It's keyboard, I get keyboard layout. I take a look at it because some reports state that malware will not execute on systems with specific keyboard layouts. Based on the assembly code, we can see that different language identifiers of the keyboard layout are checked. If one hits, the malware appears to take another path. It could be either excluding different languages or be targeted at them. In the Yara rule, I will only check for one language identifier. The reason is that the order could be different on other samples. I could also look at for all checks separately, but I decided to only look for the first identifier, which is 0x437. So I note all opcodes and skip those which could differ on other systems. Examples are jumps to addresses and dynamic resolve data sections. I can use the question marks or the square brackets to determine random bytes. Similar to the Maze rule, I checked the strings in a Google search. I found nothing that pointed to potential false positives. As a result, all strings will be used in our rule. After analysis, we write the rule. The name is ransom_zz_ta505_glop_gen. We fill out the meter section and get to the strings. This time we have 3 groups: unique strings, unique artifacts and the opcodes for the keyboard layout. We fill out each group and make sure to look for a full word ASCII at each string. Finally, we look at the condition section. Similar to the maze rule, we check for the MZ header and the reasonable file size, which is in our case 800 bytes. 3 of the unique strings, 1 of the other facts and the opcodes, or 18 of all of them should work fine. The next step is to test the rule against our goodware and malware test set. We had no hits on the goodware set. This is good and the rule does not produce any false positives and no non-malicious files. As a result, we can go hunt for more samples of the clop ransomware. This time we use VirusTotal's retrohunt feature. We simply create a new retrohunt job and copy and paste the rule into the window. This takes some time. We can see that we had one pro match. Pro samples are older than 90 days. This means that there are either no clop samples uploaded to VirusTotal or the rule is not good enough and too specific. It is extremely unlikely that there are no clop samples within VirusTotal. As a result, the rule is not good enough. I looked at the rule and noticed that I messed up the opcodes. It is too specific. Some of them can differ for other samples. As a result, I corrected it, tested it again against the goodware and the malware test set with no false positives, and uploaded it to VirusTotal. As you can see, the number of matches changed. Based on the results, we are able to collect more samples and hunt for potential new variants using the keyboard layout check. I also double-checked the improved rule in hybrid analysis Yara hunting feature. Here we had 32 listed files. Some are even tagged with Lokagoga, which is another ransomware. As a result, they share potentially the same keyboard layout check. Let's summarize everything. I was able to learn about ransomware families and their specifics. I was also able to find new versions and additional samples of the families I wrote the Yara rules for. I was not able to detect code sharing between families I looked at. And I'm not sure if I can match big upload chunks to incidents. Sometimes I have one day where up to 50 uploads for one family occur in a short period of time within VirusTotal. This could be related to an ongoing incident. However, I'm not able to match those days with leaks or incident recorded in the news. After seeing in the demo part of this presentation, I failed multiple times. Based on those, I have 3 things I learned. First, test your rules properly and on a good test set. Use unique strings or not just strings that look odd. And don't get too excited and think about opcodes. I want to thank you for your attention and the R2CON staff for organizing this awesome conference. Each year it's a blast and I learn a lot of new things. Sadly, this year I'm not able to connect to you in person, but hopefully we will see each other in the next year's conference in Barcelona. Have fun at the rest of the conference and keep reversing.